This is based on Lesson 5 in your Adobe Go Live CS2 book, Classroom in a Book. Lesson 5 starts on page 198. In this lesson, we'll be taking a look at adding and formatting text on a web page. For your information, I took the step of copying the Lesson 5 files or Lesson 5 folder from the Adobe CIB folder on the U drive to my own personal drive. So you might want to take a minute at this point to do that. Copy the files from the Adobe CIB folder, Lesson 5 files, and put that on your own drive. I think it's important for you to realize that Adobe Go Live is more of an assembly program than an actual, in a way, creative program. Yes, it allows you to create a look for a website, but it depends very largely on having pieces in place before you make your creation. So it depends on having pictures, it depends on having text, it depends on having buttons and all those sorts of things made so that you can link them or set them up on your page and link them in place. That's especially important when it comes to text. Adobe Go Live is not a text editor. It doesn't do a good job of spell checking, it doesn't do a good job of grammar checking. So if those things are important to you, then you should set up your text in a word processor and copy and paste the text in. And that's also why you're going to notice there when we start working on page 200 that it talks about importing and working with text. It doesn't say type in an essay. Alright, let's get started. On page 200 in step number 5 it says to double click on the file called lesson05_start.html. Notice I have my Lesson 5 site already opened. I am also going to try to make a point of keeping my tutorial space a little bit smaller in terms of horizontal layout. Page 200, importing and working with text. Go to File on the menu, Open, Faculty Text, and Open. And look for a little box probably at the top left corner here above your working bar. And I'm going to resize this box so I can see what's inside of it. You could also have double-clicked your faculty.text over here to accomplish the same job. Step 2 says to select all the text in this box and copy it. Two methods of doing it. I click in the box, go to Edit, and select all, and there's also the keyboard shortcut Control A, and then we'll copy it, edit copy, or Control C, and that will put that text into our clipboard. I'm going to minimize that text box for a minute. I'm going to click in the center of this box over here and go Edit, Paste. The next section, Basic Formatting in HTML on page 201, will be quite familiar to you because you're used to using toolbars to format text. The toolbars that we'll be using here in this editor are somewhat basic compared to those that you've seen in, for instance, Word or some other programs. Step 1 asks us to click in Faculty and Staff and to use the centering tool, Align Center tool. Step 2 asks us to pick the Faculty and Staff text and go up to the Set Font Size box. Notice that there's two sections to this box. The top section is an absolute sizing. 7 is the biggest, 1 is the smallest. Default font size is size 3, and that's what our current font is at, and we're told to pick 6. The bottom section of this is relative sizing, So if you were to pick -4, you would take your current font size, take 4 off of it, and we have 6 minus 4 is 2. And that would be the 2 size. I set it back to 6. The next 3 buttons here are, in a way, font effects. Strong is a lot like bold. Emphasis is like italics. And teletype changes the actual font appearance to make it look like teletype. So we'll try them out. History, strong, next line, emphasis, English, set it to teletype. I'm not going to undo them. I scrolled down to the bottom of the text box. I turned to page 202. We're looking at creating lists from text now. There's a list of names at the bottom. I'm going to pick them. We're asked to use the numbered list button, and that puts numbers on the list. If you click inside the list now, you can manipulate the list by increasing or decreasing indent to change or add sublevels. I'm going to repick this and change it to unnumbered list. Now, in HTML terms, we are looking at 2 different concepts. We have an ordered list, which is numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, versus an unordered list, which is just bullets. And that's what you would see in HTML coding. I'm going to leave them coded as that. On page 203, setting text color, we're asked to go to the headline, faculty, and in the main toolbar, set the text color. You could go to System Colors and pick whatever you wanted. You could go to Define Custom Colors and pick something in there and go OK. We could also double-click this set text color and use a color picker in combination with these bars to pick whatever we like and go OK. It's always a good idea when you make a custom color to add the color that you've made to the swatches by clicking the Add to Swatches button so that you can use it again later on and go OK. And there you go. And the swatch we just made will be sitting here. I turn to page 204 using the CSS palette and editor. One of the most important things to remember or to consider when using CSS or cascading style sheets is that they're a tool to help you keep your formatting consistent not only on a page but also through an entire website. It's very similar to using the styles functions that you would have found and would have used in Microsoft Word. And I'd like you to keep that in mind as you're working through this section. I'm looking at step 2 on page 205. I'm going to collapse the color window here and expand the CSS area. We have a limited space to work with, so that's one of the things that we can do to give us extra space, and this drop arrow collapses or expands the sections in these palettes. I'm going to scroll up to the top of this area in my text. I have the standard editing tool picked. I'm going to click at the end of faculty and staff. Up in the top of this toolbar, I'm going to set the format of this paragraph. And a paragraph happens every time you hit enter. I'm going to set it at heading 1. Heading 1 is the largest heading size, and heading 6 is the smallest. Same idea as you would see in Microsoft Word. I'm going to click behind history, as in step 5, and I'm going to change history to heading 2. Step 6. The director is going to get changed to heading 3. Turning to page 206, using the CSS editor to redefine markup elements. If you recall, in the last section we just worked through, we defined some paragraphs as being heading 1, heading 2, and heading 3. those headings would correspond to HTML tags H1, H2, and H3. And we're about to work with that in the CSS editor. The CSS editor can be accessed in various places. On the main toolbar, there's a button here, and in our CSS dialog, there's a button in the bottom left corner. And if you click the button, it opens the editor. We're asked to make sure that our staff and faculty information shows up as we're working with the CSS editor. I'm going to rearrange my palettes here a little bit. Step 2 says to click and hold, create a style that applies to markup elements, and you'll notice that there is a whole bunch of different things in here. Step number 3 asks us to go to the H1 tag and let go. At the bottom right, there is a button here for create new font family. We're going to take the trebuchet and notice that faculty and staff changed. Our next step, page 208, formatting the body text of your page. Our editor is open. We are going to go to the top left of this, create a new CSS statement. We're going to go to New Style and Body. We're going to go to the Create a New Font Family button, and we're going to pick the Verdina set. Up at the top, there's a Font Properties button here. You can click that. We're going to go to the size area here, and we'll set the font size to be in pixels, and we're going to type in 16. So that'll change the size of the body font in our paragraphs. And notice that our font in here changed. Using CSS styles to format your text on pages 209 and 210 has us creating new formats for headings levels 2 and 3. I think it'll be sufficient for us just to do heading level 2. So I'll go back up to the top here and I'll make a new style for heading 2. This time I will pick a color and I will change the font to something like serif, something different, and that will be sufficient for that. In order to make this work for us, we'll be looking at page 211, applying the CSS to the body of the text. I'm going to click somewhere in here. I'm going to go to English, and I'm going to go to our paragraph here, and I'll set it as heading 2. And you can see that that text now has that heading 2 font style applied to it. And our history up here has heading 2 applied to it also, but in addition it also has that strong setting on it. Before we leave this section completely, I think I should point out a couple of the functions of some of the buttons in around here. I'll go through them quickly and just give you a quick description of what they're good for and what they'll do. Text properties allows you to change how text appears, whether it's left, right, etc. As you look through, you can adjust your indents, you can adjust your spacing between words and letters. This block properties button will change how a paragraph or a block of text appears. This margin and padding properties box basically talks about how closely text or how close text will be allowed to go to the edge of a cell, or how far away it's going to stay away from the borders of a cell. This border and outline properties basically talks about how thick the border will be, how it'll be colored, where it'll be top, bottom, left, right, etc. This list item will change how the bullet appears and how big it is and where it is. And the background properties will talk about what kind of image or what kind of color will be behind the text. Turning to page 216, exporting an internal style sheet. The things that we've been doing in the last little bit have been basically setting formats, which is useful, but they only set the formats for one particular page, the page that you are working on. It's far more useful if you can actually set up the style and apply it to multiple pages so that you only have to set those formats up once throughout an entire site. And also, from an editing perspective, if something needs to change, that it can be changed in one area and have it automatically also travel through or migrate through the entire site. So, what we're going to do in this area is export internal style sheet information to an external sheet so that it in turn can be applied to other pages. My CSS editor is still open. I'm going to click the Source tab as displayed on step 1. You'll notice that we don't have near as much information in our section as there is in the textbook area in step 1 because we didn't set up the number of headings and other things that they did. If you flip back through the pages all the way to about page 209, we just basically touched on it and introduced it as we went through. I'm going to go back to my CSS definitions tab. I'm going to go over to the right hand side here and click this button, and I'm going to click Export Internal CSS. We'll be prompted to name the file, so we're going to call it VertexU Styles. And we're going to save. So that step makes those styles that we just set up available to other pages. Our next step in our learning comes from page 217, importing an external style sheet. Step 1 says to go File, Open. We're looking for our history, and we'll open it. We're going to go to the CSS editor, click Import External CSS, go find your Lesson 5 folder on your personal drive, and in the Lesson 5 folder you're going to see something called VertexU_styles. Pick that file and click Open. And we have completed Lesson 5.